Today on MuscleCar, our Pro Street throwback gets some love as Project Business Time receives tubs in the back, hood reinforcement in the front, and exhaust underneath. Not to mention a bumper swap and mods that bring the look of this old Dodge up to par.
Hey y'all, thanks for joining us. Today our Pro Street Dart Project Business Time is going to get up close and personal with the business end of a MIG welder. We've got these 33 by 1850 Mickey Thompson ET Streets wrapped around a set of 15-inch weld racing forged aluminum wheels. Of course, the only way this setup is going to fit in this A-body was with some heavy modifications. With some help from Scott Winnie of S&W Race Cars, we knocked out the floor of our old Dart and plugged in one of S&W's back half kits.
Of course, it's time to put the floors back in, which also includes our big old tubs that go around our street slicks. S&W offers a sheet metal kit, which we're going to use to put on the bottom of the car to help sew it back up. They're bead rolled for strength so that they won't wobble or sound like rolling thunder if we should happen to drive over a set of railroad tracks. The radius of our tires will be the starting point for the height of our tubs. We've got the rear at ride height, and we're building in a couple of inches extra in space for suspension travel. Tom will mark where we're cutting off the bottom of the inner panel, and then working his way around the edge, he'll make marks every 2 inches, which I would duplicate on the top panel.
Number 6 is 21 3/4.
Okay. The purpose of those marks is to tell us how far the quarter panel is from the frame rail so that we can cut the top of the tub to fit right up against it.
Next, we can take the inner panel and lop off the excess on the bottom of it so that it's flush with the frame rail. Now, to join the side panel and the top panel together, S&W uses a Pittsburgh style joint. Now, whenever they roll this joint into it, it's always a little bit tight. So it's good practice to take a screwdriver or pry tool and open it up just a bit. Okay, now I've got to try to wrap this flat panel around the crescent panel. But before I do that, I want to flex this one or put a little curve into it. Makes it easier to do.
And you got to be careful when you're doing what Tom's doing, because you don't want to kink the original joint that's along the edge in order to fit the crescent panel to the flat panel.
Take this piece, slide it into the joint. These Pittsburgh joints are common in the land of heating and air work, but neither of us are HVAC pros. So it's good to have two people to wrestle this thing around and get it lined out.
It's pretty good. Our grinder will give the edge of the top panel a seat along the quarter, which is where it will get tacked in place.
All right, we've got our tub where it needs to be, so we can go ahead and fit the rear panel. It's going to attach to the inner quarter and the frame rail. That's all it is to it, just a little bit of measuring and a whole lot of fitting. Now, you guys seen us make these kind of things all the time. It's just a 90-degree break with a shrink to form whatever we're working on. I've measured from the bottom of the curve to where we want the back of our next panel to be, which was 16.5 inches. Now we're going to make us a mark right here on the leading edge of the curve of the panel. Measure out 16.5 inches. Make sure you don't measure from the edge in, because it will mess up your result. Now I can cut our panel down to width. And on this piece, I'm going to make life a little easier by attaching it to the factory floor instead of the quarter panel. No need to reinvent the wheel when this piece will suit our needs just fine. I'll also use our metal brake to put an angle at the top of the panel so that it lays down flush.
There's still some metal left to cut out of the floor, and there's several ways to do it. We could bust out the torches or even a cutting wheel, but trust me, one of the best purchases you'll ever make is a good quality plasma cutter. This Miller Spectrum 625 Extreme plasma cutter weighs in at just 21 pounds, but it cranks out 40 amps, which means it's rated up to 5/8 thick material. It can plug in either 120 or 240 volts, making it portable, powerful, and versatile.
Punch some holes in our new panel so that we can do some plug welds. And I also cut a couple notches so that it can clearance the beads that are rolled on our new tubs. That way when we're all said and done, we can turn out a lot nicer piece.
While Tommy was doing that, I cleaned up the area where I made my cuts and extended the rear crossmember out to the rear quarter panel. That's pretty much the procedure to burning these floor panels. And now we get to repeat it a bunch of times. And that can take a long time. Well, that takes care of the lion's share of the tin work on this floor. We're going to finish up where we've cut here, as well as the transmission tunnel. And as you've seen, we have a boatload of button welds that we have to grind. So if I get the cameraman to leave us alone for a little while.
Is your hood flaccid and floppy? Well, we've got the mod to stiffen it right up for you. And later, minor mods for header fitment and a sexy bumper treatment. Oh yeah.
You guys may remember when we shoved that engine into our Dart, we had to cut a hole in our new hood to make room for that big old 871 blower. And now it's time to clean this thing up a little bit. When we cut that big hole in it, it left a few gnarly spots that don't really look all that great. Not to mention, if we don't fix them, can cause us some issues later down the road. For one thing, the inner structure hanging down there for all the world to see doesn't look all that great. And when the car gets up to speed, this part of the hood can be flexing, flipping, and flopping and all kind of crazy like.
So we're going to tidy it up a bit just to make it look nice, and then we're going to reinforce it to make it a little stronger. The purpose of the tape is to give me something to reference as a nice straight edge. And make sure to cut away any excess that could get in the way of my grinder. To get around the corners, I can draw a line around the outside of a socket. This works really well, and you can change the size of the socket based on what you're working with. An electric grinder with a flap wheel is a great way to line up your edge against the tape, ensuring that you've got a nice straight hole. In the tighter radiuses, we're going to use this carbide bit to make shorter work of it. The paddle wheel is just too large to get into the small crevices, and we should be able to do this pretty easily.
Now that Mank's got our hole dialed in exactly where it needs to be, we can finish it off with a few pieces of metal. The idea that we have is to take a few strips of metal and cap off the inside of the hole of the hood. Not only will this improve the appearance, but it also give the hood some strength that it needs by connecting the upper and lower panel back together. I'll use an air grinder to give us a good welding surface. All right, all we're gonna do is lay this up there, tack weld it as we go. It's okay if the strip that you have is wider than what you're trying to cap off. All you have to do then is come back and grind off the excess right before you do the welding. Sometimes I use a straight edge to push the panel where it needs to be. That way it helps keep the metal nice and straight. To get to the back side, I'll take the hood off the stand and tack in the bottom of the strips. All right, with our pieces tacked in on the top side and the bottom, we can trim off the excess with a body saw. Now, you don't have to do this. You could just grind it all off, but this will save you some cleanup time. I'll bust that electric grinder back out and use it to flatten down the strips against the hood. Now all we have to do is a little bit more welding, finish it up with some grinding. That's all it is to it.
After the break, our A-Body's exhaust gets an exit strategy worthy of its Pro Street heritage. Plus, the Dart gets a new chin. What? Is it moving to LA?
Hey guys, welcome back. We're getting ready to put the exhaust system in our Dart, and obviously this is one of those applications where we can't use any run-of-the-mill system, especially with this K-member and that motor. So we knew we were going to need a set of custom headers for this application. Cook's Headers, that's with a K, is who Arrington Performance recommended. Since NASCAR race teams use these headers, we had no problems giving them a call. These are a set of long tube headers designed specifically for our engine with the O2 sensor bung already welded in. And if you look here, you can see that our flanges have just been tacked in place instead of finish welded so that we can adjust them if necessary. A lot of parts manufacturers will take the time to do this for you if you just ask, and it can save a lot of time during the mock-up process. The headers also came with hardware, gaskets, and the O2 sensor extensions, which can be real handy. The The best part about these headers, even with all these mixed and matched parts, the only thing that doesn't quite fit is the motor mounts. I'll mark a small section where we'll notch the mount and then we'll get to work. A die grinder with a cutting wheel is a good way to make a couple of cuts along the width of the mount. And we can use the body saw to make the curved part of the cut. A piece of tube cut lengthwise makes a nice plug for our hole. I'll just use an acetylene torch to heat it and beat it into shape. A few quick passes with a grinder, and after it cools, a coat of gloss black Duplicolor. And she's ready to go home, and we've got about 1/4 inch of breathing room for our mount. And that looks real nice.
We're gonna be moving a lot of air out the backside of our Mopar. So those headers manks poking in there, it's gonna get married to a set of these MagnaFlow stainless mufflers. Now these things are a performance muffler, so it won't be choking down our engine, and at the same time, it'll give us that sweet sound that we're looking for. To hang our mufflers under our car, we opted for a 3-inch MagnaFlow hot rod stainless steel pipe kit. It's got a variety of building blocks that we can use to customize our system, like mandrel bent J's, U's, L's, straights, and a whole mess of hangers and flanges. Yeah, looks like we got plenty of room for the coilover and around the rear. Looks pretty good, so we're in good shape. We took one of the brackets that come in the kit and cut it down so we can make us a removable hanger bracket. With our big street slicks tubbed and dual MagnaFlows hung, this blown Hemi is getting closer to some pro street action.
Stick around to learn all about bumper swap surgery for a snazzy new look. You're watching MuscleCar. For a DVD copy of this episode, just go to PowerBlockTV.com and order your copy for just $5.95 plus shipping and handling. Start your own MuscleCar collection, delivered right to your door from the PowerBlock.
Hey, welcome back. We're fixing to get started whittling away at something that's been bothering me from day one that we picked this whole thing up. The front bumper is twisted just a bit, so instead of trying to fight this darn thing to get it back straight, we're just gonna pop on another one. You may remember that when we headed down to Stevens Performance and picked up a new set of seats, we also snatched up a set of bumpers for this old girl. The front bumper came off of another 74 Dart like ours.
While we're making the swap, we're going to do some cosmetic modifications in keeping with the theme of the car. We'll keep the bumper in the same basic shape, but we're adding these relief holes along with hitting it with a base that's the same color as the body. The overall idea is to give it an industrial look, which fits right in with our Spartan approach to this build.
What we want to do is dimple our holes like this piece right here. Looks pretty snazzy, don't it? Problem that we have is we can't really put our bumper in the press because it's got a big curve in it. And then we wind up messing up our new bumper worse than our old one. So what we're going to do is drill some holes and dimple them on some 1/8 inch plate, which is dang close to the same gauge as our bumper. Then we'll just replace a piece of our bumper with our new modified section. So this is the piece we're going to use right here. So let's dimple this dude up. I'm going to find the center of my strip and draw a line right down the middle. I want my holes to be 3 inches apart from center to center. So I'll mark those holes out, use a center punch to knock in a seat for a drill bit, make some pilot holes, and use a step drill to whittle them out to 1 inch wide. Now using the dimple dies is pretty straightforward. You just separate them, put it in between them, put the top one on, squish it, back it up, squish the top one once again, helps to make it a little more flat. Then move on to the next one. This dimple die is a part of a set that we got from SPC Performance. They range from 3/4 all the way up to 6 dad-blane inches. First thing I'm gonna do is draw me a line to establish a common point to measure from. The reason I did that is that helps me keep this thing straight. That way I can measure from here to there to make sure it's running parallel. I'm going to trim a bit off the end so that the piece fits the contour of the bumper. Then we'll make sure she's nice and straight, and we can mark the part of the bumper that gets to go bye-bye. When you're slicing and dicing on a bumper like this, a grinder with a cutoff wheel eliminates having to deal with any slag and makes welding in your replacement piece quite a bit simpler. Remember, even though this is pretty thick steel, you can't just pull the trigger and run a 2-foot bead. You'll warp this thing into oblivion. Weld a little in each spot, then move around to keep from overheating the metal. Well, there you go. We repeated the process on the passenger side, and we'll prep it for some body work, and we'll paint it when we do the rest of the car. And we'll have us a one-of-a-kind bumper.
If you've got any questions about anything you saw on the show today,
go over to PowerBlockTV.com.